Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I'm Reed, and today we are going over chapters 16 and 17 of the Dragonbone Chair. So we're going to dive right in here to chapter 16, The White Arrow. And as I mentioned kind of at the end of yesterday's discussion, this story jumps right into Simon again feeling the weight of everything he's gone through. Not only has he witnessed Morgannus die, not only has he witnessed this horrendous ritual, but he has now had his money stolen. And so it just opens with him saying, "It's not fair." Simon sobbed for perhaps the 100th time, fisting the wet ground. Leaves stuck to his reddened knuckles. He did not feel the least bit warmer. "Not fair," he murmured, curling back into a ball. The sun had been up for an hour, but the thin light brought no heat. Simon shivered and wept. And it wasn't fair, it wasn't at all. What had he done that he should be lying damp, miserable, and homeless in the Aldheord forest, while others were asleep in warm beds or just risen to bread and milk and dry clothes? Why should he be hunted and chased like some filthy animal? He had tried to do what was right, to help his friend and the prince, and it had made of him a starveling outcast. So after those moments of self-reflection, he kind of rediscovers that he has the manuscript of Dr. Morgannus, and so he opens it up, and he reads something interesting, which to him seems to indicate, or he just asks himself, was Morgannus trying to say that Prester John had not killed the red dragon, or only that he had not been chosen by God to do so? If he hadn't been chosen by the Lord Osiris in heaven, how had he killed the archbeast? Didn't the people of Erkenland say he was the king anointed by God? So Simon is almost getting a first brush with destiny here. He's trying to comprehend what it means to be meant to do something. And it's almost as if, again, he doesn't know whether or not Morgannus was suggesting what Simon thinks he's suggesting in the manuscript, but it is possible. So Simon has to consider this, and he might be realizing that, are people destined to do things, or is fate, is destiny a thing? And as he's kind of rolling up the words, something comes to him, a paper that he forgets to pull, and this passage says, "If he was touched by divinity, it was most evident in his comings and goings, in his finding the correct place to be at the most suitable time, and profiting thereby." It was not exactly a foretelling or a prophecy, but it strengthened him a little and hardened his resolve. Northward it would be, northward to Naglemund. So he has some renewed hope, some a little renewed resolve. As I said, it hardened his resolve. So then we kind of go forward through his journeys, and this is a few more pages later when he finds in the forest, he finds a cottage, and he goes in, he looks around a little bit, but the cottage is empty, and he wonders, was the cottager, are they out? Will they be back? Were they attacked by an animal? Are they dead? Will they, will he see this person? And as he is kind of walking around a copse of trees by the cottage, he notices a hanging figure, or a figure that's within a trap. I believe it is. It's like there's a prisoner kind of hanging up in a tree that's caught in this weird noose, and Simon it just notes here, if he was a man, whoever this is tied up in the tree, he was a very slender man. His high-cheeked, thin-boned face reminded Simon for a moment, a horrifyingly cold moment, of the black-robed creatures on Thisterborg, but where they had been pale, white-skinned as blind fish, this one was golden brown like polished oak. So he realizes that these creatures are the Sitha, that immortal race that had been mentioned when he had discussed things with Morghenus. So he realizes, oh, this is not a man, this is a Sitha. And the Sitha just yells or says, coward, spat coward. And Simon goes up to him and he says, I don't want to hurt you. I didn't set the trap. And then the cottager, the woodsman, comes back. And he's like, oh, look, I caught him. He's mine. And Simon is confused as to why he would kill him. It's not like he has any reason to trust or hope for something good within this Sitha that he found. But, he's been surrounded by so much death. It's interesting that he views what the woodsman is doing as hasty, and he wants to question it to his face, maybe to stop one more death, one more tragedy from happening along this journey. That could possibly be it. And the woodsman tries to kill the Sitha, and then Simon he grabs a rock and he comes up on the woodsman and he hits him in the head with a rock, and he appears to have killed the woodsman. And so Simon cuts the Sitha, or as he also refers to them as the Fair One, he cuts the Sitha free, and as he's moving away, he hears this buzzing sound right past him. An arrow sticks into the tree, and it's a white arrow. And no more arrows come. And he hears a voice that says, go ahead and take it. Go ahead to take it. The arrow, take it. It is yours. And then as he takes it, Simon hears a new voice. O daughter of the mountains, this does not seem good. So that's the end of chapter 16. There will be a few things I have to say about this chapter in a spoiler section, but we're going to move on for now to chapter 17, Binabik. We get introduced to a little mountain man named Binabik. So again, that voice from the end of the last chapter, Simon sees someone approaching him, and at first he thinks it's a child based on this person's size, but then he realizes, no, it's a man, he thinks at first. But then he asks, where are you from? And Binabik tells him, I am of the troll folk of Ikanuk, High Ikanuk, in the snowing and blowing northern mountains. And you are? He stared suspiciously for a moment before answering. Simon of Urchester. This was all happening rather quickly, he thought, like a marketplace meeting, but in the middle of a forest after a bizarre slaying. Holy Osiris did his head hurt, and his stomach too. Where are we going? To my camp. But first I must find my mount, or rather, she must find me. Please do not be startled. So as they go off towards Binabik's camp, Binabik has a little wolf-like creature named Kantaka, who seems to be his, and even though Kantaka is a wolf, there's a great intelligence that is almost belied there. And so then they get moving for a while. And Simon is just extremely hungry by this point, and I believe, yeah, then Binabik finds some food, or he goes off to get some food, and they have some broth, I believe. And Binabik is almost, in many ways, he is a culture shock to Simon. Simon has never seen a troll from the Econoc region before. He doesn't know what to make of Binabik. And Binabik seems to have kind of a lightness and, almost excitable energy to him. And again, Simon doesn't know how to perceive that. And of course, he had the experience with Kadrak, where Kadrak took his money. He had the weird experience with the Sitha and the Woodsman, where the Woodsman tried to kill the Sitha. Simon seems killed the Woodsman, and he has no reason. He has no reason to trust Binabik. And Binabik just confounds him because as he wakes up, Binabik says, "Ah, it is friend Simon." The troll grinned over his shoulder and quickly swept the objects into his open skin bag, then stood up and hastened to Simon's side. "How are you now feeling?" he asked, bending over to place a small, rough hand on Simon's forehead. "You must have needed a great sleep." "I did." Simon moved closer to the fire. "What's that smell?" "A pair of wood pigeons who have stopped to dine with us this morning. Keeping them company are some berries and nuts I gathered. I would have been waking you up soon to help entertain them all. They're very good tasting, I think." And again, and Simon grows suspicious. It says, suspicion flared in Simon's breast. The idea of someone handling the doctor's writings while he slept made him covetous, distrustful. He snatched the proffered bundle from the troll's hand and replaced it in his belt. The little man's cheerful look changed to one of dismay. Simon felt ashamed, although one couldn't be too careful, and took the arrow, which had been wound in thin cloth, more gently. And, and Binabik seems to know a little bit more about this white arrow, the importance of it, where it comes from. And Binabik tells Simon, "You are the holder now of a quite honorable thing, Simon. The white arrow is not given in lightness. It seems that this one was fletched in Tumitai, a Scythi stronghold long since below the blue ice east of my homeland." So this is something obviously that is very significant in Binabik's mind. And Binabik tells him, "It is a mark of a debt that is owing, and what you should be doing is to keep it safe. If it has nothing else to be, it will be a beautiful thing to look on." And Binabik tells him later on that he just wishes to know where he's going, and Simon tells him it's very interesting when he's having this issue of trust, but then he thinks through it. He thinks to himself, could the little man's curiosity really be as innocent as it seemed? He had made the mistake of trusting at least once already with that damnable monk, Kadrak. But what choice did he have? He did not have to tell the troll everything, and it was certainly preferable to have a companion versed in woodcraft. The little man seemed to know just what to do, and suddenly Simon longed to have someone to rely on again. "I'm going north," he said, and then took a calculated risk. "To Naglamund." He watched the troll carefully. "And yourself?" Binabik was packing his few implements into his shoulder bag. "Ultimately, I expect to be traveling far north," he replied without looking up. "It seems that we have a coincidence of paths. How strange that you should be traveling toward the Naglamund, which stronghold's name I have heard much in recent weeks." And he mentions just, he's heard it, but they'll have more time to talk about that later, and that's kind of where the chapter 17 ends. So, we get introduced to this weird Sitha creature who gives Simon the white arrow, and then we get introduced to Binabik and Kantaka. Again, characters where Simon is like, it's a world of mistrustful and distrustful individuals, But Simon realizes now he has to take a risk to trust, and he doesn't have to, divulge everything. He can kind of keep Binabik at a distance, which he needs to do right now. And so for now, he's trusting Binabik, and, as the first time reader, we just don't know, if Binabik, Kantaka, or, if their intentions are good, or why they, what they're doing, where they're going. But I will get into some things here for spoilers. So spoilers for here on out. So we get introduced to Jariki and Binabik. Jariki is one of the most fascinating characters in the series. And I will admit, when I first read this series, when I got to this part, I figured, Jariki would be a very shadowy figure, not someone who would ultimately become one of Simon's greatest allies. Binabik, I always, had that intuition that he was one of the good people in this world. And Binabik, I'm sure I'm not alone that, immediately when he's introduced that, Binabik became, I'm sure, one of all of our favorite characters. And it's interesting kind of going through this and really reading into Simon's thought processes again, because he's trying to know who to trust. Again, his trust has been shattered completely, especially with Cadrak. So he's learning how to trust again, and he realizes that even though he wants to go to Naglamund, he cannot do it by himself. He has to find somebody, and for now he has found Binabik, which will ultimately prove successful. Binabik is an ally through and through. But, you can't help but understand Simon. He has no reason to trust Binabik, but yet he has no reason to distrust him yet. Kind of fascinating. Also interesting that there's a little more foreshadowing into the Osten King, Prester John, killing the dragon or not killing the dragon that is finally confirmed in the last book. I completely forgot that was really the first thing of that manuscript that Simon reads. Kind of significant that Simon begins to just briefly question, did Prester John actually kill the dragon? Which, of course, we know he didn't. That was kind of the narrative that was constructed around that. And so it's interesting seeing Simon kind of grapple with that notion of fate and destiny, and can somebody be so bestowed by some divine influence? But all he knows is that he just needs to continue north to Naglamund. That's all on his mind right now. So yeah, a very interesting, and I would venture to say crucial chapters 16 and 17 here. So if you've read these, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time for the reading of chapters 18 and 19.